Hello and welcome to another League video here on ModernNexus.com. My name is Ryland, also known as Holy Shamgar on Twitch, and today I am playing with Amulet Titan again. A bunch of you had requested this, and I am happy to oblige. I really enjoy playing this deck. But a lot of you are already going to be familiar with this. I obviously have the deck tech from last time as well. Not much has changed with the list that we're playing today. I don't remember specifically exactly the list that I was playing last time, but obviously it was very close to this with perhaps some minor sideboard changes and a couple main deck changes. So if you're already really familiar with this, you might want to skip ahead, but either way, there might be something new here for you. But for those of you who aren't familiar, Amulet Titan is a deck that is obviously trying to cast its two namesakes as much as possible. This is not a deck like Living End. We're trying to avoid our namesake, but rather we want to cast a Titan typically around turn 3 if things are going well. And we're going to do that by abusing Amulet of Vigor alongside these bounce lands, these Ravnican bounce lands, or at least Ravnican block bounce lands. And these, of course, produce 2 mana, but require you to return a land to your hand when it enters the battlefield. Amulet of Vigor has those untap right when they enter, so you will be able to use the mana. If you're so fortunate to have multiple amulets, in fact, there will be multiple untapped triggers which you can use to float the mana between those triggers and end up with a wildly large amount of mana. As such, we can produce Titans particularly early. As early as turn 2, but that is infrequent. It does not happen a lot. It requires multiple amulets plus additional ramp. But anyway, so because our deck is centered around those 2 cards, you'll see a couple deck building, not constraints, but you'll see some impact of those cards throughout the list. As such, we'll have a lot of sort of tutorable lands that are particularly useful because of the Primeval Titan. And we should go over those real quick. So because of the Titan, we have this package of lands, right? Also because of Ancient Stirrings, there's some overlap there as well. But we have this package of lands, which includes Bojuka Bog for exiling graveyards. Sometimes you'll find that in the sideboard instead of the main, but today we have it in the main. Cavern for any control, counterspell heavy matchups. Ghost Quarter for anytime we need to deal with pesky lands. Radiant Fountain for a little bit extra life. You'll find that this card is very, very relevant in burn matchups because you can use your bounce lands to bounce and repeatedly play Radiant Fountain and gain a whole lot of life off of it. Calmly Garden for getting some chump blockers. You'll see this come into play against Tarmogoyf decks or Shadow decks. Slayer Stronghold is a commonly tutored for land, as it will be used to give your primetime haste. If you do cast like a Titan on turn 3 with an amulet, you can go ahead and grab like Boros Garrison and Slayer Stronghold. Go ahead and give it haste and vigilance as well as +2/+0, and then get another trigger as you go to attack. So that card is particularly useful in the deck. Sunhome to give it double strike can often be used in combination if you have the spare mana. When you go to attack, you can get like another bounce land plus Sunhome, and if you have a spare mana, or 2 rather, then you can also be activating your Sunhome. And then Vesuva. Sometimes you'll already have a land in play and it'll be kind of annoying, but you can use Vesuva to bridge the gap. Like maybe you've already used your Boros Garrison, but you really want to attack with a Primeval Titan by grabbing Slayer Stronghold and Garrison. Then you can grab the Vesuva instead, copy the Garrison. Things like that. Vesuva will particularly be helpful for. And then a huge part of the deck is Taliaferro West. The biggest thing that makes this deck so powerful is its ability to produce Taliaferro West and a bounce land when casting a Primeval Titan or when attacking with a Primeval Titan. Why is this so powerful? Because you can use the mana or mana later or whatever. You can bounce this Taliaferro West and use it to transmute for essentially what is going to be another Titan in a Summoner's Pact. Now, there are other things we can grab as well. We can talk about that tutor package a little bit more in the future. But being able to chain Primeval Titans is what makes this deck so powerful. Once you've already cast one Primeval Titan, you really don't care if it gets dealt with, as long as you've got another backup through Taliaferro West, which you can grab off the Titan itself, which is just insanely powerful. So we'll talk about that tutor package a little more later, but Summoner's Pact, obviously the thing that we're going for the most and the thing that we have the most copies of. As far as bounce lands, we're most interested in Simic Growth Chamber, and that is because of the Taliaferro West. We need to have a lot of blue, which actually can be tough, considering we're on Groves instead of something like Botanical Sanctum. But Simic Growth Chamber, the lands we'll be going for most often because of that Taliaferro West interaction. Boros Garrison, a necessity for stuff like Slayer Stronghold and Sunhome. Not a necessity, but commonly used. And then we have one Selesnya Sanctuary in case you need to get white some other way, as well as Gruul Turf. So we just need to have a density of bounce lands. 9 seems to be the accepted amount at the moment. But Simic Growth Chamber, obviously the one we go for the most often, except for, you know, comboing Boros Garrison with those other lands. But then we also have some additional untapped lands. Basics, obviously a necessity in Modern, both because of Blood Moon and because of Path. You'll find that Blood Moon is still quite good against us, but we have some insulation for that in our sideboard as well. But we got those basic forests for stuff like Path and Ghost Quarter and Blood Moon. Gemstone Mine's also wonderful in this deck, both because there are some random color requirements because of things like early green mana and blue, as well as, you know, coming in later. Botanical Sanctum can be more of a hassle than this, as well as sideboard stuff like Pyroclasms or Rurik Thar, or even sometimes paying black for Dismember. But you'll find that we're not that worried about the Gemstone Mines dying because of the ways we can bounce them. Now, sometimes it will be a concern and affect the way we play, so maybe it would be better to have less Gemstone Mines, but honestly, ensuring that we have more blue mana and having it be an always come into play untapped land are the biggest draws to having Gemstone Mine. And then lastly, Grove of the Burn Willows is kind of a free roll in the sense that it's an always come into play untapped green land. It gives us a little bit of extra red sources too, which is an added bonus. And then most importantly, it's a hedge against shadow decks. Obviously, you can use it to cause your opponent to actually gain life, shrinking their shadows. Using it repeatedly, or especially in multiples, can really put the hurt on the shadows and make them quite small and buy you a lot of time that way. So those are wonderful in that regard, and that's why we have them. They're really, Death Shadow is declining in the meta. There's a lot less shadow than there once was, especially online. But it's just doesn't really hurt to have in the list. Giving your opponent the life in matchups, in other matchups, just doesn't really matter that much. So it's not that big of a deal. So we mentioned these Taliaferro Wests and this tutor package. Summoner's Pact, the thing that you often go for, but Pact Negation particularly helpful in other combo matchups, where maybe you resolve the Titan but can't kill your opponent this turn, and you're afraid of them killing you on their turn with Ad Nauseam, with, you know, Storm, whatever else. Pact of Negation can obviously, the mirror perhaps. Pact of Negation can obviously generate a little bit of insulation in that regard. Engineered Explosives also way more commonly than Pact, tutor target to deal with problematic permanents, to kind of wrath against something like Affinity, you know, whatever. And Walking Ballista similarly can be used to either finish your opponent off or clear up the board. Also kind of a contentious card here. Some people not a huge fan of Ballista, but there are a reasonable number of times you want to tutor for it. It just really does depend on the matchups. I personally, at the moment, like having it, but I do see the perspective of people who say it's not quite good enough, and we'll consider that moving forward. However, the pact is the same, right? Like, I feel like these are worth having because there are situations where I'm going to want them, but I feel similarly about the pact. I don't tutor for it a whole lot. But when I do, it's very relevant, and I kind of feel the same about the Ballista. So sometimes you will draw those, and it will be annoying, both the Pact and the Ballista. But I think that's okay, and it's worth having since our deck is so good at seeing the tutor targets. Then on top of that, we got a few different elements of our deck here, other than those tutor packages. We've got some ramp elements. And and then we've got a couple different consistency elements here. Ancient Stirrings functions very, very well for the deck because it allows you have so many weird different lands. Just picking from those can be quite useful, as well as being a mechanism to find Amulet as fast as possible, as well as incidentally sometimes finding Engineered Explosives, Ballista, or Relic when convenient. But mostly you're using this to find Amulet. All of those are just kind of added bonuses that make this card good in the deck. And then Relic, kind of a meta call, also kind of brought to the deck because of Death Shadow. When it was rising in the meta, that's why people started to play, well, one of the reasons people started to play Relic in this deck, but I still think it's quite good, even with Shadow on the decline. Being a way to interact with many decks as well as a cantrip is kind of exactly what you want for that slot. So that's what we got that. And then we got all these ramp elements, Explore, Sakura, Tribe Scout, and Azusa, all allowing us to play additional lands to abuse with our bounce lands, especially when we have Amulet. And if we don't have Amulet, ways to quickly develop our mana to get to prime time in the quote-unquote fair way. So that's kind of our main deck here. In our side, we've got additional explosives for matchups where that's particularly good. Pyroclasm, in a similar regard, stuff like Devoted Druid, Affinity, what have you. Sometimes you'll see K returns in this slot because of its ability to kill Etch Champion, but Pyroclasm being 2 CMC has been relevant for me lately. I'm still not sure which is correct. Dismembers, wouldn't mind having a third necessarily, but a couple Dismembers for matchups where we need to quickly kill creatures, whether that be, you'll see the side in Dismembers a lot, honestly. There's a lot of overlap for that. Swan Songs for control matchups. Seal of Primordium, Rexage for both Affinity, random enchantments, random artifacts, but mostly for Affinity stuff like Blood Moon as well. Seal of Primordium being particularly good because you can cast it before the Blood Moon. Rexage being particularly good because we can tutor for it with Summoner's Pact. And then we've got kind of a selection of fatties here for siding in. Rorikthar obviously particularly good against Storm, acceptable against Burn, Control, things like that. And you'll often see a sideboard plan where we actually board out our namesake in Amulet in heavy interaction slower matchups, and then board into a whole bunch more threats, leave all of our other ramp elements, shave on different things here or there depending on the matchup, and then just be like dramatically more threat dense and just be like kind of a fair ramp deck. You'll see us do that a lot in, fair in quotes, I guess, but you'll see us do that a lot in matchups where they're going to have an easy time dealing with amulets. So black-green X matchups, control matchups, blue-white or Grixis or whatever, stuff like that, you'll see us usually leaning away from Amulet and siding into a lot of things like this. So that's kind of where we're at here. I hope that's a lot of information if you're not familiar with this deck at all, but I hope that at least gives you kind of a little bit of an intro, and hopefully you enjoy the deck today. Like I said, there's also those other matches if you're a little hungry for more from earlier. But either way, let's go ahead and hop into these games, and I'll see you in a bit.